This is the app. The link was in the email yesterday or this morning. It was in there last week. The app is $6. It emulates the calculator perfectly. So we do a quick review first of some of the things we talked about last week, and then we'll jump into some new content. So the first thing is the 5 keys in time value of money. And I'm going to say this again because I always say it. Make sure you bring pen and paper. There's lots of notes to make. Morning, Tom. How are you? So in the top row of the HP 10B2, you look good. We have N, IYR, PV, PMT, and FV. Okay, so these 5 keys are the time value of money keys, and these are the same keys whether you're using the HP 10B2, the 12C, a spreadsheet, a standalone program. It doesn't matter. They're always the same. So very, very quick explanation. N is the time, IYR is the rate, PV is the present value, a lump sum that occurs at the beginning. PMT is the payment, which is periodic each time period, and it doesn't change. And FV is the lump sum at the end, the future value. I know it's kind of a quick explanation, but we did all this in depth and detail last week, so I'm going to be kind of quick on my review today. But we start with these. These are the important keys. Here's the trick. Trick is find 3, solve for the 4th. And it always works that way. These all interchange. So you might have the term, the rate, and the present value, which is very common. You solve for the monthly payment. Today I'll show you one of the examples is if you have the payment, the term, and the rate, you can solve for the present value, which in that application would be the loan amount. Okay, so PV is not always the price. It could be the amount you're borrowing. It also could just be the down payment. All depends on your application. But either way, it's always find 3, solve for the 4th. The next thing you must be mindful of is something called the number of payments per year. And in our use in Does It Pencil, we're going to have one of 2 choices, either 1 payment per year or 12 payments per year. Okay, so 12 payments per year, this is monthly payments, and 1 payment per year for time value of money purposes, this is what we use for appreciation. Because in time value of money, appreciation only occurs, excuse me, 1 time per year. So we balance the number of payments per year for our problem at the beginning of the problem. In the lower left-hand quadrant of your main screen on your device, on the 10B2, not on the 12C, Craig, but on the 10B2, it'll show you the number of payments per year you're preset for. And if you have to change it, your key press is always the same way. It's number of payments per year you want, and then the gold key, and then the N. So I'm in 12 payments per year now. If I want to go to 1, it's just 1 gold key payment. Sorry, it's not N, it's PMT, my bad. 1 gold key payment gives me 1 payment per year. If I want monthly payments, it's 12 gold key payment. So it's always number of payments per year, gold key payment, and here you're going to be either at 1 or 12. Those are the 2 modalities that we use in Does It Pencil. Okay, a real simple time value of money problem, and I'm going to write it down. I'm going to go through some simple key presses, then I'll bring my device over and we can do it together, okay? So what I want to do is to solve in this problem for the PMT. We're going to solve for the monthly payment. That's what we're going to do in this problem. And we're going to assume that the borrower borrows $500,000 and the loan they get is at 7%. And that's over 30 years. Okay, so this is pretty standard fare. You get this from your mortgage brokers. It's just, this is what we do. Everybody knows what this stuff is, okay? But the question is, how do we take this information and solve for the monthly payment? Okay, and how do we do it more specifically on the 10B2? Here's how we do it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to type in the number 12, then the gold key, and then the payment. Okay, what that's going to do is to preset the device for the desired 12 payments per year. Okay, that's first. Now, again, I said this last week, I'll say it again. This does not change unless you physically go back in and change it. So this doesn't change when you turn the thing on and off. It only changes when you physically go back and make it something else. Okay, then the next thing we're going to do is gold key clear all. Okay, now this is a very, very important step. And I say we do this before each and every operation we do, every problem, no exceptions. As you guys probably know, and I mean, it's in the advertising, I've taught this stuff to over 50,000 people in my career. I've been doing this for 36, 37 years, something like that. And, you know, back in the day, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Zoom classes. We didn't have all this stuff. So I had to get my ass on an airplane and go fly all over the country, and this is what I did for a long time. And I've been in so many rooms with so many people, and I watch people get so upset, so pissed, so angry, and it's always the same reason. They're not pressing gold clear all. It's the same thing every time. I'm not kidding you. Okay? Now, there's different ways to clear the device, but I just have to say again, this is a really important thing to do. Because if you don't do this, you get what we call ghosts in the machine, and you get the wrong answer, which is not the reason you're doing this. So make sure you always press gold clear all. Okay? Now, I'm going to enter these three next, and let me make this point now. You can enter these in any order. It doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that you do this stuff first. Payments per year and clearing. Okay? So I'm going to type in 500,000. Then I'll press the PV button to put this amount into the PV register. Now here's a side note. This is positive because I am receiving it in, I am the borrower. When I solve for the payment at the back end, it will solve as negative because as the borrower, I have to pay that back. If I was to enter this as a negative, the inference would be I'm paying it out. I am the lender. And if I'm the lender, then the payment will end up being positive at the end because I'll be receiving payments. So I'm just flagging this right now. This and the solution to the back end, one always has to be positive, one always has to be negative. Then I'll type in 7 IYR to enter my interest rate, and then I'm going to press 30 years and gold key N. Now, I said this last week. Let me say this again. This is a critical step. This is another thing people forget. On this device, on the 10B2, it's designed to preset for the right number of payments per year. And then when you enter the N value, you have to press the gold key first, because what happens with N and IYR is there's a conversion. It's calibrated by the number of payments per year, which I'm not going to get into right now. I talked about this last week. Just make sure that when you do this, that you're on the correct number of payments per year to start with. Enter your I value. And whenever you enter your N value, no exceptions ever, 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 always press the gold key first. Okay. You got 3 solved for the 4th. Your last key press is to press PMT. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to press gold clear all, because I'm already in 12 payments per year. I've already done this step on my device. Now I'm going to type in 500,000. I'm going to press this key right here in the top row, the PV key. That enters the 500,000 into the PV register. I'm going to tap number 7 and then press this one, IYR. That's the interest rate. And then type in 30, gold key N, and now I see it's 360 because it's taking the 30 years and multiplying it times the 12 payments per year that's stored in the payment register. That's how this thing is designed to work. Last key press, just tap PMT. Okay, and I get 33, 26, and 51 cents. And it's negative. This is called sign convention. Got the little negative thing right here because they cannot be the same sign convention on both ends. You cannot receive and then receive or pay and then pay. All right. That is a super simple demo of how to solve for a monthly payment. If you are new to time value of money, if it's been a while since you've done time value of money, if you hate time value of money, you just have to practice it. It's not complicated. You just have to go through it. And look, you just got to get used to, what are all these buttons? What the hell is he talking about? It's like anything else, and once you do it you're going to understand. The problem is when you don't do it for 5 years and you go, oh my God, how did I do that? Well, fortunately, we have this thing called video on the internet. Are dealing with sellers who are essentially saying in their own way, I want more money than my property is worth. Anybody running into that? Okay, I think anybody who's, what's that?
And Mercedes, I'm raising my hand.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very common. I talked to a great alumni friend of mine a couple days ago, and he's like, sellers just, they still think it's 2020 and buyers still think it's 2008. Okay. So these are expectations. Now it's important to remember in this job that you guys do of trying to help people buy and sell properties. And look, unless you're working for an hourly fee, it is self-serving. I'm just going to be honest about that. There's an inherent conflict of interest. Let's call it what it is. But that said, sometimes people, it's like Christine said, I told this lady, here's the brass ring. I showed her the brass ring. I put the brass ring in her hand. I chopped up the brass ring, gave her the straw and said, just inhale. I did everything I could, and she still wouldn't take the brass ring, okay? So some people are just that way, and that's just part of humans, okay? But all that said, here's my question for you. Have you guys ever asked these sellers who just need to come down in price? We can sugarcoat all you want, but a pig is still a pig regardless of the shade of lipstick. Have you ever asked them, why do you think your property's worth as much as it is today? Have you ever asked them that question?
I ask them that question all the time.
Okay, and what kind of answers are you getting, Craig?
Well, I get a lot of Zillow. That's the value Zillow tells me.
Okay, so comparable sales.
Yeah, comparable sales, and also, they have this kind of idea in their head what the value of the property is based on the postcards maybe they've been seeing from the neighborhood and sales, and they of course always take the highest sales and think that their property is in that class.
Okay, so they're going with comparable sales, all right? Now I'm just going to illustrate my point here using simple numbers. Let's say that let's say somebody's owned a house since 2020, okay, 5 years. And let's say their house has doubled in price, okay, based on a comparable sale basis. Again, simple numbers to illustrate my point, straight line appreciation, 20% per year. Why has it done that? Why did it go up that much? Have you asked them that specific question? Like, why do you think this really happened? What made that Zillow comp what it is today? Have you asked them that question?
Interest rates. Yes.
Okay, what specifically with, okay, what are you telling, okay, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I told them that because the interest rates were so low, I said, it doesn't, this is what I tell all of my clients. It doesn't matter what you buy the property for. If you qualify for a payment, you're either, if the interest rates are high, then you're paying more interest than principal. If the interest rates are low, you're paying more principal than interest. So you qualify where you qualify. People qualify for a monthly payment.
Okay, good. That's good. And I agree with everything you said except for one thing. Just because you have a low interest rate does not mean that you're paying more principal and less interest at the beginning of the loan. But everything else I completely agree with.
Right. I guess what I meant was you're going to be paying a higher price for the property than if interest rates are high, you're paying a lower price for the interest for the property. Your payment is your payment is your payment.
So what I want to do next is to use time value of money to expand a little bit on what Christine just said, because she's right. And I want to do this kind of methodically and sequentially, because I think that in some cases, if you can follow what I'm saying and then you can replicate it on your own in front of a client, that you'll have some level of success in getting sellers to align their expectations with the market. Okay. So the first thing is this, and if you want to just write this down, you can write it down in a way that makes sense to you and that you can understand it. So first thing is, there's an inverse relationship between price and interest rates. So what I mean by an inverse relationship is that when one goes up, the other one goes down, and one goes down, the other one goes up. Okay, so when rates go down, prices go up. That's the simple application of this. And then a lot of people know this. I get a lot of head shaking, and that's good. But again, what I want you to think about is taking what I'm showing you now and for the next few minutes and adapting it to your presentation so that you can become an educator and not just a salesperson. Okay, and not that being a salesperson is bad. I just came out that way. Okay, number two. If we look at the history, and I don't have a chart or a map or data to back this up, but I think I'm pretty safe in saying this, your mileage may vary. But from about, let's say, 2010-ish to about 2020, for about that 10-year period there, the general talking point was that properties went up about 3% per year. That was the general talking point. Now, you can adapt this to your market, and obviously there's going to be outliers, but that's basically what it was. And if we were to go back and look at interest rates during that time, and they really started coming down when Greenspan was chairman of the Fed, but we can see they were somewhere between about 6% to about 6.5%. That was kind of the range that we saw in that 10-year period. Okay, so that's the history. Suddenly, this thing called COVID came, okay? And when COVID came, the Fed took what happened in the bond market was essentially they took what was that 6% interest rate and suddenly it became like a 3% interest rate. It basically cut in half. Now, some people got the 2.75 or the 2.9 or whatever, but it sort of more or less was just this, okay? And that brings me to number 4. Okay, now again, I'm talking to a seller. So what I'm going to tell the seller is one of the things you have to understand as a seller is how it is for the buyer. Okay, now this isn't complicated. What happens is this, a very simple process they go through. The first thing is the lender has to determine how much monthly payment can the borrower borrow. Okay, and they go through all the stuff that they do. It's called DTI, debt to income. Look at their FICO score and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they come up with a number that the borrower can borrow at. This is what's called pre-underwriting or pre-qualification for a buyer. So let me just show you an example here, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let's say that a borrower can afford a $3,000 a month payment. Okay, now they've determined this with their lender. All right, let me go back first to 2020 and show you how much buying power this monthly payment had at 3%. And I would get out my side notes or whatever, and this is what I would do. 12 gold key payment, gold key clear all, 3,000 negative plus or minus PMT, because this gets paid out. And if you missed last week, the PMT key is right here, left-hand column, 4th row down. I'll use that in just a minute. 30 gold key N because it's still a 30-year mortgage, and at 3%, and then we solve for the PV. Okay. Now, in a presentation, I'd probably have this already written out, and I would just pull out a fresh piece of paper, because what I like to do when I'm presenting one-on-one is, first of all, I don't sit across, I sit next to. It just makes it friendlier. It's a lot less of a lecture. And if you ever met me, I'm like 9.5 feet tall and I weigh 1,200 pounds. So anything I can do to make myself smaller helps. Okay. So we're sitting there doing our thing, and I go, and so this is what it looks like on the calculator. Once I get back to the calculator, here we go. I'm already in 12 payments per year. 3,000 negative payment, 30 gold N at 3% interest, and I solve for PV. So under this scenario, this borrower, I'm just going to round this up, can borrow rounded $712,000. That's pretty good. But as you probably know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we are not in a 3% interest rate environment today. We are in about a 6.5% interest rate environment, 6.5 to 7. So let me just show you what the same thing happens at 6.5%. And so it's basically all the same things here, but this becomes 6.5 IYR. Okay, all these key presses are the same. So what do we say, 3,000? 3,000 is the payment, 30 years, 6.5 is the rate, solve for the PV. And we get 475,000 rounded. Okay, so the difference here, what we call the delta. So if I take 712 and subtract 475, that borrower just lost $237,000 of buying power based on the same payment in both scenarios. It is what you said. That's why I said you're right. Well, it did. Okay.
Am I not on mute? I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry.
No, you were not on mute. I heard you. We all did it, and it's on tape, so be careful. All right, so this is the world we're in right now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. As you can see here, 237 of 712,000, or yeah, 712, is about 33% loss in buying power. Okay, and that's 100% because of interest rates. Now, markets don't move like stock markets in real estate. They tend to move much slower. But what we're seeing right now is that it's a softer market, and I'm just telling you this is why. And then I stop. And depending if I'm dealing with people who are dominant or analytical or how emotional they are, that's all the people stuff. I let them kind of consume that and digest it. But what I find is that when I'm very matter of fact with people about this, a couple things happen. One is I feel very clean about my presentation. I'm not trying to get them to do anything. I'm just telling them this is just balls and strikes. That's all it is. Secondly, I'm empowering them to make a decision on their own. And thirdly, I'm gauging how realistic their expectations are. Again, I'm using simple numbers here. You know, let's say that they think their house is worth $1 million, but I know because I'm in the market every day, it's worth $875. Okay, so you are off by, $125,000. How long are they going to hold out? Well, then you get into how urgent it is, how mad do they need to go, blah, 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 blah. But at least you've shown them this is the reason that your property has gone up so much in value, and the market basically adopted it.
When you walk in, you see terrible flow, bad design, cement floors that are painted, just a whole lot of hot mess, and you realize that buyers are not going to like this, yet they think it's $1 million house. How do you overcome that with them?
You are famous for giving me the easy questions, aren't you, my friend?
Yeah, because I've got that situation.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, good question. I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge, and I said this a couple weeks ago when I did my little talk on negotiation, never discount the role of feelings in the human decision-making process. They're everything. You know, because we're talking about people making a decision. Okay, that's what it is from our vantage point. And the first thing we need to remember about that, in my view, is how do people make decisions? Well, the science is in. People make decisions emotionally and they justify them rationally. I would bet you anything, Kelly, that if I asked your seller, well, why do you think it's worth so much? They just got the whole shopping list of why their house is the best house ever. Okay, so that's the emotion, step one, justification, step two. So my first piece of counsel is you have to understand where they're coming from and why they're coming from without bias. Okay, you have to be kind of just the scientist on this one. Okay, that's step one. Step two is to remember, and I told you guys this a couple weeks ago, I'm going to tell you again. How do you get someone to change their mind? So Jeff, I'm going to throw that one at you. How do you get someone to change your mind? What do you do?
You've got to lead them through a process of discovery so they realize that they come to that conclusion themselves.
I'm going to give you
Like your little, like your
you're half right. You're almost there, but
like your edutainment exercise there with the interest rates.
yeah. I think that
Or like maybe taking them to see homes in the same price range that they think theirs is to see the difference.
Okay, here's a little hint, and then we won't play Simon Says a lot longer. To get someone to change their mind, they have to get into a certain mental and emotional state. Do you know what that state is? Roger, what do you think? We kind of tapped on it when you were talking about when lawyers paid on the courthouse steps a couple weeks ago.
If I remember you saying it correctly, it's to create a sense of a fear of loss that they have to feel that if they don't make the decision in the way that you're trying to have them see, then they're going to experience pain.
Yes. Okay. The judges will accept that answer, but we're going to go with a little bit of a word modification. We're not going to say a sense of loss, although that is a part of what shores it up. But here's more specifically what it is. You have to get them to doubt themselves. That's the key word. Okay, so we go back to what you're saying, Kelly, is what you have to do is to get these people to doubt themselves that their house is worth, we'll just use the $1 million example because it's an easy number, okay? And I was talking about this a couple weeks ago when Roger was coaching us on how attorneys approach this in the courthouse steps environment was the context we were talking about. And what I said was, oftentimes in those situations, what lawyers will do is they'll start whispering to their clients, well, this is a bench trial and that judge, you just can't tell, or, what's called voir dire for jury selection. Those jurors, I don't know if they're going to agree with you. They start whispering these things. And in that story we were telling a couple weeks ago, that's, of course, after all the clock has been spun for the lead up to the trial. But nonetheless, it's the same thing. You've got to get people to doubt themselves, okay? And then what shores that up, which is what Roger did say, is to get them to recognize a fear of loss if they don't act now. It's the basis of the most simple advertising we've all seen 1 trillion times. Okay, act now and you can buy one, get one free, but it's a limited supply and a limited time and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I don't know these people, Kelly. There's a lot more to the story, but my answer is, number one, recognize their emotions. And if I was going to use the feel, felt, found negotiation gambit with them, I would, number one, acknowledge how they feel. Number two, I would say to them, if I was you, I might feel the same way. That builds empathy and rapport. And number three, this is the switch, you would say, But here's what other sellers have found. Okay, and that's where you start whispering fear of loss, creating doubt, things of this nature. Okay, and if you can back it up with facts, that's when you do it. But I think I'll finish with this. I think you're really serious, and I know you are, about changing somebody's mind. And I pre-apologize for this word, but someone I can think of right now. You have to sort of buy into the art of seduction. Okay, you got to warm them up. You can't just walk in and go, well, you're a fool. It's not worth this much. Look at all this shit everywhere. I mean, you don't say that. You warm them up, and the oldest salesman in the world will talk to you about beginning a presentation with small questions that ask for yes answers. That builds a subconscious momentum. You can use that if you want. But you don't just walk in and go, bam, this is ridiculous. Are you crazy? You lead them to the water. Okay? And I think the last thing I'll say is this, and this is also a part of a negotiation. You recognize the line of time. And this is one of the things I did after the conundrum negotiation that we did. I'll do a little picture here. So every negotiation, and when you're talking about getting someone to change their mind about price, it's a negotiation as well, okay? So I like to look at it this way. This is the beginning of the negotiation, and this is the end, okay? So there's a line of time. And there's a couple things with this line of time concept you have to remember. The first thing is this. Most people make most concessions right against a deadline. Most people do. Okay. So if I'm Kelly, I'm making this listing pitch. The first thing I'm fishing for is, what is your time motivation? Okay. What is your deadline? If you don't have a deadline, I don't know if I'd be in that negotiation, because everybody negotiates against deadlines. Everybody. Okay. And then there's this thing in the middle, which is what I call the point of no return. And this is a moment in the line of time in a negotiation. It defines itself this way. If you stay in this zone right here, the zone of possible return, what it means is you can quit, go back to the beginning, and not have lost. But once you get beyond the point of no return and you get in here, you're into it so deep that you have to finish. And if you don't, you will have lost too much. All right? So we illustrated this when we went through the conundrum negotiations, part of the way it's built. But kind of look at where you are. And this is, this is experience, it's nuance, it's your own intuition. I mean, look, we've all had this client where just like, these people just are not going to be real. And you've got to ask yourself, as a business person making a business decision, do you want to play? I want to take a minute and talk about a current event, which does not include pressing buttons and stuff, but I think this is important for us to recognize. The Fed and the President of the United States and what's going on right now, okay? And I'm not here to do anything but be the umpire. I don't want to get in a food fight. I just want to call balls and strikes here. So right now we have a chairman of the Fed who has made a very demonstrative comment that the Fed will not lower interest rates until they see inflation at 2%. It's a very common talking point if you follow this. And, I'm not here to agree or disagree. That's what they said. The markets respond. The world gets it. All is well. Okay? Right now, and I've been very direct myself about my absolute belief that the way that the government measures inflation is a complete fraud. But let's just go with their number, which is about 2.9%. Okay? So that 0.9 and 2.9%, that's called 90 basis points. A basis point is 1/100th of 1%. So 2.9% is 2% plus 90 basis points. And I'm going to use basis points in the next part I'm going to say here. I said about 2 or 3 weeks ago that the tea leaves that I read, and the people who I think are honest, did not think that the Fed was going to cut in the last FOMC meeting, and they did not. There has been a reaction by the market that last week Jay Powell was hinting that they're going to drop 25 basis points next month in September. So what does that mean? What some people think in the real estate business is automatically, oh, mortgage rates are coming down a quarter of a point or 25 basis points. That's not what it means. What it means is the Fed might drop their overnight lending rate, and we'll see how the bond market responds. I don't want to get into inverted yield curves and stuff like that. That's not why we're here today. But I just want to kind of put the flag up that says, even if the Fed lowers rates 25 basis points or a quarter of a point, don't think it translates directly into 10-year treasuries and 30-year mortgages, because it does not. It depends. All right. So that's my first point. My second point is this. We're living in a moment in history right now where the current president, like him or not, has been very direct about his absolute desire to change the membership of the Fed. Now, Jay Powell's term expires in May of 2026. And Trump fired this other lady in the interim. We'll see what that food fight ends up being. I don't want to comment on that. I don't know. But what we're seeing right now is the executive branch is trying to reshape the membership of the Fed, and it's 100% an effort to get the Fed to lower interest rates. Okay? Now, the reason that the president wants that to happen is because that'll make stock markets go up. It'll make mortgage rates come down. It'll make house values go up. We've been to this movie before, okay? But you pick up one end of the stick, you also pick up the other. So I want to just kind of put out here for a minute and then wrap up with what you guys have to say. What happens if one day you wake up and interest rates are down 50 basis points or 0.5%? Do you think, suddenly all is well in the world? I would say not. I would say in the real estate sector, you'd probably have a bigger problem you have right now, because you'd have even more people vying for less supply. And what does that do? It makes prices go up. Okay? So if you're a seller, that's good. So if I was Kelly's client, I'd be saying, let's just wait a while and see what happens, because if rates come down, I have a better chance of getting my $1 million. And that's true. That is true. I'm just kind of saying this. I want to have this talk so you guys have, an agnostic view of this is how this thing works. But if interest rates come down, and all of a sudden things start getting cheaper, how do you define inflation? Inflation is when you have more dollars chasing less goods. Okay, well, again, we've been to this movie before. So I would say if you just suddenly drop interest rates a bunch, you're going to see inflation go up a lot. That's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. And that is one of the main objectives of the Fed, is to keep inflation curtailed as well as maximize employment in the employment sector. Okay? And by most objective measurements, they're doing a pretty good job. We can always bitch slap other people. That's just not hard to do. But if we look back over about the last year and a half, from when we had 9% inflation, we've had a fairly soft landing this time. And I'm old enough to remember we had some crash landings, like during the Paul Volcker years in the early 80s and things like this. So that's kind of where we're at.